going to reopen up the running lanes for these backs. That's why they felt confident that they could go ahead and go. These guys, just let them go. They're going to run. They got fresh legs. Let's move Tate out of the way and let these guys do their thing. And they're going to just be able to continue to do that. I expect to see them just continue to grow more confident. And it's scary to think. You talk about the initial offensive line in 99. Scary to think with these guys as they start hitting their stride running, what they could have done with a full season of the initial offensive line the Browns had this season when Mac was still there and when they were just plowing guys from the get-go. They could be averaging $180 all season long on the ground, So,
I think you're right. I think, this team adds a right guard next year, and I think they're in great shape. And speaking of an offensive line, I wanted to notice that, I don't know if you read a Monday Morning Quarterback, but Peter King's column, but I like to check in with that. I don't do it every week, but I checked him this morning, and he had as one of his 2 special teams players of the week this week, Joel Bitonio. Huge. For making that tackle on the missed field goal return that almost became a touchdown a la Auburn. Running that ball out. He did a good job of faking it. And, of course, Jesse Hester, best return man ever probably, and he's making a run for it. He got down to about the Browns 30 before Bitonio finally bowled him over. But that was a play. Peter King thought that was worthy of Special Teams Player of the Week. I just thought I would bring that up. I thought it was fun.
Yeah, you know what? That was the play of the game, and as far as I'm concerned, I hadn't even mentioned it here 2.5 hours into the show. That's on my notes. Huge play of the game was Bitonio making that saving tackle. I'll tell you what, talk about that, just like when the stat comes up on the screen, I was sitting there watching the game, and we set up for that really long field goal that I thought was ridiculous that we were even attempting. And the announcer goes, Devin Hester's set up for the return. And then here comes the snap, and the kick is called off because of the timeout, and the Browns missed it. And I texted a friend of mine at that very instance, and I said, I would change plans if I were the Browns. If they kick this again, Hester's going to return it for a touchdown. I just got this feeling in my gut, especially because it was the second time, and things always get wonky when you redo kicks a second and a third time. And that kick floated in slow motion to Hester, and I knew it. Jerry, my son, was watching it with me, and I said, he's going to do the stutter. He pretended like he's not moving, and then he lulled everybody, and then boom, he takes off. And I said, man, he's gone. And Bitonio comes on our screen out of nowhere and saves that tackle. And I said, man, I'm so glad. I've never been more glad to be wrong in my life because I predicted a touchdown before that play even happened. I was so glad Bitonio saved it because the Falcons knew, Hester knew, I'm getting a touchdown. These guys aren't even ready for this. And that was well done by the Falcons and even better done by the Browns' Bitonio for making the tackle. What terrible clock management there. Almost really backfired by the Browns.
Yeah, and who knows? I mean, Mike Smith made them look good later in the game. I fail to see, I guess, and people were bitching about the clock management and the critiques of the game and the accounts of the game that I saw were criticizing both sides, both coaches trying to out-dumb each other in terms of clock management. I don't know. I guess you could find fault. Browns take the ball with 3 timeouts left in 44 seconds. They move the ball 60 yards in 39 of those seconds to get in place for the field goal. It's kind of hard to criticize anything that they had 3 timeouts. They used them all. Now, I might have tried to spike the ball instead of using that 3rd timeout when they did, and tried to save 1 timeout for if you get tackled in the middle of the field or something, trying to move it closer. But that was really the only criticism I had of Pettin's clock management. Now,
wait a minute,
on the other hand, with 55 seconds in the game, should have run 30 seconds off the clock before he gave up the ball. But
are you talking about Pettin at the end of the second half? Because I don't have any problem with what he did at the end of the game. I was talking about that at the end of the first half when they left 2 timeouts.
Oh, yeah, when they're trying the field goal. And I suppose that kick could have been run back, though, if there was 1 second left on the clock. It wasn't
my point was, if you had used your timeouts, they let 15 seconds run off the clock earlier on that drive before. If they had used a timeout, they may have had one more chance to get 10 yards closer and at least not try a 60-yard field goal. That's really minor to me with Smith at the end. And in all fairness to him, remember, guys, the Browns had all 3 timeouts. So It's not like they were just going to run 30 seconds off the clock. The Browns were going to stop, assuming they didn't get a first down. Now, clearly, that would
right.
have been
If they hadn't called the timeout, the Browns would have.
Right. The Browns would have maybe.
Is the argument against that?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Maybe
in
you
Smith's
lose.
Defense,
Maybe
he knew that, and
maybe Dan,
and
you
maybe
lose
he
what,
hadn't
10
made up
seconds?
his mind yet whether he was going to go for the field goal or not, or whether he was going to try and get it. But
so just so you know, at most maybe 5 to 8 seconds less were on the clock there had he ran the ball, and that's being generous unless they break it for the first down, and then they just win the game right there off of a first down run. So it wasn't the dumbest guaranteed giving the Browns the ball back with 44 seconds, and they used every bit of those 44 seconds. So maybe that 8 seconds would have been the difference. Maybe the Browns wouldn't have been able to get that last.
Yeah, it could have been. The bigger picture story for the Falcons is that they've vastly underachieved now, and he's one of a few coaches. I've got to believe that he's gone. I've got to believe that Rex Ryan is gone, and they're going to make a change in Oakland. So there's going to be a little bit of a coaching carousel this offseason, I guess, as there always is. But I think Smith has probably worn out his welcome down there.
You heard what John and I were saying. If he wins that division and backs his way in sub 500, he could still make the playoffs and get fired. I have no doubt about that, man. So
yeah, well, it's crazy too, and I've been reading more and more about this as this, especially as that NFC South division continues to suck. That how unfair it's going to be for that division champion to be guaranteed a home playoff game when you have the possibility of a 11-5 or maybe even a 12-4 wild card team, say the Cowboys or the Eagles, who may come in with a stellar record and be a wild card team and have to go on the road the first week of the playoffs, while maybe a 7-9 Saints team or Falcons team can host a playoff game. It really is going to raise some eyebrows about this playoff formula that the NFL has that guarantees a division champion a home playoff game.
That's what John and I were just saying. Like, could you imagine like a 12-win wild card team having to go to one of those South teams' home stadium and be a road game for them? And yeah, that's crazy there. And in the AFC, there's going to be a couple double-digit teams that don't make the playoffs. You can just easily see that coming. We were just kind of running through that grouping there. There's going to be a couple of them as well. That's why this division is key. You cannot. We mentioned it at the beginning of the season when nobody was talking playoffs. We said this division is going to be won, or this playoff spot's going to be won through the division here, because it's going to be hard pressed for the North. I mean, they can get a wild card. Don't get me wrong, because they can end up with two playoff teams, but that's going to be hard, especially last week of the season when they're all going to knock each other off when they play each other. So two teams are going to lose, and so winning the division is the way to the playoffs here in the North. It's the only guaranteed way.
Yeah, I think you're right, and it's similar to what happens in baseball, where it's hard to win a wild card spot out of the American League, the division that the Tribe plays in.
American League?
You got to win the division, or you're just not going. So,
you know it, baby.
Yeah, you're right. And we got the Ravens in Baltimore that last week, and I don't know. Everybody's so up and down. We talked about it a few weeks ago that week to week, whoever's the fashionable pick this week. Last week it looked like the Patriots and the Packers. I don't think this weekend did anything to change that, but that's unique. Usually you'll be looking around at the end of a week of NFL football, and you'll have a couple new Super Bowl favorites because teams rise and fall so quickly. But the cream's starting to rise to the top now, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm slightly more optimistic about my Browns coming down the stretch after yesterday. Obviously, not only because it's a notch in their 7th win, a spot that most of us felt they wouldn't get to all season. But seeing Gordon back and being Gordon, and looking like he's in game shape, although we did see him, with the oxygen mask on the sidelines at one time.
Yeah.
But everybody says he's in good shape. No reason to. He certainly looked like he was in game shape. Maybe a little bit winded, but who knows? You got 5 left, and 3 road, 2 home, and you got to believe you can at least snag a couple of those and have a winning record for the season. And playoffs will shake out the way they shake out. But I'm keeping my expectations more reasonable than that.
Hey, you had 2 wins in the last 6 is where you were at checking in. They already got one of those here with 5 to go. So let's see what they can do next.
Yeah.
Buffalo coming up. And that could go. Let's see how they do tonight. As I said, that could go different ways. What team that is coming in and how they come off of what happens tonight. What kind of practice week they're able to get in and all of that stuff. But that is a very, very, very not only winnable game, obviously for the Browns, but to me, it stays right up there in must win. And earlier in the season, we couldn't use those words, but now you can. When we sit here and say that there are 10. Well, after tonight, there could be in the top 10, 8 of them in the AFC, all at 7 wins. Yeah, they all start to become must-win at that point down the stretch. So Buffalo's one of those teams that's right underneath where the Browns are. You have to win that game. We'll talk about it Wednesday, obviously. You and I will be talking about a couple of games Wednesday. Let's segue off.
Let's talk about the game.
Is there a game? I know there's the Browns game this weekend. There's some Cavs. There's another game this weekend too, right? They play football there.
Yeah, turns out, and it's interesting thinking about Ohio State, Michigan, of course, is who we're talking about, and because this week really is different. I mean, it means next to nothing this year, except it's the game, and Urban Meyer gets that. Jim Tressel always got that. There are some people along the way that really haven't gotten it, but it's hugely important even when it's meaningless. And I by meaningless, I just mean the Buckeyes have already clinched the Big Ten title game. They're going to be in that game no matter what the result is Saturday. Now, they're going to be in or out of the national title picture, the national playoff picture, based on a win or a loss Saturday. So in that regard, it's meaningful. But in terms of, playing the rest of the season out and getting to the Big Ten championship game, meaningless. And for Michigan, it's relatively meaningless. They're 5-6. It means bowl eligibility for them, but if you look at it, what it means is the Poulan Weed Eater Bowl or some comparable bowl game for them. So it's not that big a deal for them to get to a bowl game. The more meaningful for them, of course, is the 15 extra days of practice or whatever they're going to get that college teams really crave, because they can take a look at their young players and they can just have an extra month really of practice that they need. Going into the following season to evaluate players. But that's more meaningful than actually getting a chance to play in the Poulan Weed Eater Bowl. But, it's probably Brady Hoke's last game. Immediately thoughts started going back to 1989 when Earl Bruce was playing his final game, and the Buckeye players came out, and Bruce had been let go before the game, and they came out and beat Michigan. They all were wearing their Earl headbands. If you remember, you probably don't remember.
Yep. Well, I've seen,
but
yeah.
They were inspired by the fact that they were playing their last game for their head coach, and I don't see that kind of loyalty to Brady Hoke on this Michigan roster. They looked like a dispirited, beaten group. They lost to Maryland. I watched a good portion of that game. They lose a home game to Maryland, and they're so irrelevant that no one even cares across the college football landscape. It wasn't even a blip on the radar that Michigan lost it in the Big House to Maryland, because that's the nature of their irrelevance right now. But they didn't look like a team that was going to be ready to rise up and go win one for Brady next week in Columbus, because their body language was just saying something different, like, we quit, we're ready to go home, we're ready for this to be over. And I sent you that one article today because it was from a Michigan website, and it sort of basically said that same thing. Hey, do we really have to go to Columbus and play this game? Seems like it's sort of the mindset of this Michigan roster right now, and you hate to speak for young kids like that, but that's what their body language is saying.
Dan, I quoted that at the beginning of the show. I said, well, we'll talk more about this when Dan joins us, but he sent me an article from Michigan here that you know what kind of week it is when the first paragraph basically says, well, we know that this year doesn't really matter, so we're looking ahead. And I'm like, well, that right there is usually the clue that they're not expecting much when that's coming from their side of the ledger. And they're just going, well, can we just fast forward to next year, because we already know how this is going to go. But I mean, and you and I will preview the game coming up. You never, ever discount anything in a rivalry game, because those are always out of the control of just the normal how games play on paper. We saw last year, I mean, that was far from a foregone conclusion until the very, very end of that thing, and that can easily happen again.
You're right, and that tells you, you can predict a few things about the Ohio State-Michigan game, and and one of them is it's going to be closer than it has any business being. You know, one team can be clearly better than the other. One team